My parents told me to lose 40 pounds before my wedding, or they would make sure there was no wedding. My mother proved she meant it by sacrificing a $5,200 deposit, canceling my venue behind my back, and telling half our town that I had a medical problem. I'm Blythe Calder, 34, and I own one of the busiest catering companies in Ashford, Ohio. I could manage 200 guests without panicking, yet one dinner with my parents could still make me feel 11 years old. They thought shame would force me back into line. They did not know I was about to invite the grandmother they had erased for 13 years, or that 22 relatives would eventually walk out of my mother's reunion and come to my wedding instead. Chapter 1: The Gift with a Leash. My mother slid a laminated sheet across the Sunday dinner table on April 28, 2024, as if she were handing me a seating chart instead of an ultimatum. At the top, she had written 24 weeks. Beneath that were weight targets, a meal plan, Monday weigh-ins, and one date circled in red. October 12, my wedding day. Lose 40 pounds before the wedding, or there will be no wedding. Diane Calder was 61 and terrifyingly calm when she believed she was right. She said I would embarrass the family in the photographs if I showed up looking the way I did. My father, Robert, 64, stared at his plate until I asked whether he agreed. He said they had discussed it. He believed my mother was doing what was best for me. If I refused, neither of them would attend. My sister Megan, 30, stirred her iced tea and avoided my eyes. I asked what would happen if I married Ethan anyway. My mother reminded me that Hawthorne House was in her name. She was the signing client. She could decide whether the venue was used at all. I thought $5,200 was too much for even my mother to burn just to control me. I was wrong. A few weeks later, she would throw away every dollar. Soon after, I would drive nearly 3 hours to the door of a woman my family had forbidden us to mention for 13 years. But that night, I was still trying to call it concern. I was 34 and owned Common Table Catering on Maple Street in Ashford, Ohio. Ethan and I lived above the kitchen. I had started the company in 2016 with $4,500, an old Ford Transit, and second-hand bakery equipment. By 2024, I employed 5 people full-time and 3 on weekends. We had a licensed kitchen, insurance, payroll, and steady contracts. I knew agreements, vendors, and how to serve 200 dinners without showing panic. I was not helpless. I had simply been trained to feel helpless around my mother. The name Common Table came from the table I had not been allowed to sit at. When I was 11, my mother began placing me at a folding table beside the kitchen during family gatherings. She said I liked food and could help carry dishes. Megan stayed at the main table because she left food on her plate and never asked for seconds. The kitchen became the place where I was sent away and where I learned to feed people. For 6 years, I catered family birthdays, funerals, church meetings, and the annual Calder Avery reunion for free or at cost. I called it generosity. Later, I understood I was using food to pay rent on a place in my own family. Every year at Lakebriar Pavilion, one empty chair remained unexplained. Ethan Calloway proposed on March 30 at Red Maple Orchard after a retirement dinner. He was 36 and taught environmental science at Ashford High School. Most nights, he graded papers while I finished invoices. He never treated Common Table like a hobby. His proposal was simple, just the 2 of us beneath bare apple branches. I said yes because Ethan made me feel chosen on ordinary Tuesdays, not only during moments designed for photographs. 1 week later, my mother announced that she had booked Hawthorne House for October 12. She had signed the contract and paid the $5,200 deposit before Ethan or I had seen the venue. She called it her gift. I called Beth Lawson, the event coordinator, and asked to add my name. Beth explained that Hawthorne House allowed only one signing client. That person controlled changes and cancellation. I offered to reimburse my mother and have the contract rewritten. She said she was giving me a wedding, and I should not turn her gift into a transaction. I knew the gift came with a string attached. I just did not understand how tightly she planned to pull it. After the April dinner, I told Ethan everything. He did not tell me I was beautiful at any size. He said something better. He had proposed to the woman standing in front of him, not to a smaller version my parents expected him to manufacture. I still wanted peace. I told my mother I would exercise because I wanted to feel stronger. But there would be no weigh-ins, no reports to her, no connection between my body and my right to marry, and no vendor contact without my permission. She refused. A mother had to correct her daughter, she said, before strangers did it for her. Then she contacted Ethan privately. She sent him the meal plan, weigh-in schedule, and instructions to act like a responsible husband. She wanted him to monitor what I ate and report whether I followed the plan. She warned him that I was emotional and would thank them later. Ethan forwarded every message to me. Then he answered in a group thread that included us both. He would not monitor my weight, portions, or body. All wedding communication had to include me. Decisions about my health belonged to me alone. My mother did not reply. On July 4th, she hosted a cookout for about 24 relatives and family friends. At dinner, she carried out a separate plate for me. Steamed vegetables, dry chicken breast, cottage cheese, and none of the side dishes everyone else had. She called it the bride's plate and announced that the family was helping me become an October bride ready for the cameras. A few people laughed. One aunt called her thoughtful. My father stayed silent. Megan stared at the table. I put the plate back on the buffet. I said I was not following her plan. No one had permission to make announcements for me, and the wedding was still happening in October. My mother began to cry. My aunts surrounded her. Diane said I had humiliated her after everything she had done for me. Everyone looked at me as if I had ruined the holiday. An apology rose automatically to my mouth. I almost said I was sorry for my tone. Then I stopped. For the first time, I saw the pattern clearly. My mother hurt me, and I was expected to repair her feelings about it. 8 days later, I was in the common table kitchen when an email from Beth Lawson appeared on my phone. She was sorry to hear about the postponement. I called immediately. Beth told me my mother had come to Hawthorne House on July 9. She had signed the cancellation, accepted the loss of the entire $5,200, and said the family had decided to postpone the wedding for health reasons. The October 12 date had been sold to another couple that same morning. Beth apologized, but Hawthorne House had followed the contract. Diane was the only signing client. I stood beside the stainless steel prep table with the phone still pressed to my ear. My mother had not lost $5,200 by accident. She had spent it to prove that my life still belonged to her. Chapter 2. She didn't just cancel the wedding. He drove to my parents' house before the shock had time to settle into anything softer. My phone stayed in my hand the entire way. Beth's email open on the screen like evidence I could not stop rereading. My mother was watering hydrangeas beside the front porch when I pulled into the driveway. She looked up, saw my face, and turned off the hose. "You canceled it." Diane set the nozzle on the stone border. "I postponed it. You signed away the date. You were not ready for that wedding." It was my wedding. It was my deposit. Robert stood in the open garage behind her. One hand resting on the handle of an old shop broom. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the concrete floor. I held up my phone. "You told Hawthorne House the family had decided this." Diane folded her arms. "The family did decide." "No, you decided. You forced me to act. You made a scene in front of everyone on the 4th, and you refused to take your health seriously." She said health the way people said tragedy, slowly and with enough pity to make anyone listening fill in the rest. Then she told me she had already spoken to relatives, several women at Grace Community Church, and a few people who knew me through Common Table. She had explained that the wedding was delayed because I needed time to deal with a medical concern. There was no diagnosis, no doctor, no emergency, just my mother's tone and the silence she left after the word health. I looked past her at my father. "Did you know she was going to cancel it?" Robert gripped the broom more tightly. "I knew she was considering it, and you did nothing. I thought once you understood we were serious, you would reconsider." That sentence hurt more than I expected. He had not been surprised by what she did. He had been waiting for it to work. They had not only taken my venue, they had taken control of the story and sent their version out into town before I knew there was a story to defend. 3 days later, Denise Harper, from the Ashford Regional Hospital Foundation, called me. Common Table was finalizing an $8,400 catering contract for the foundation's fall gala. It was one of the largest jobs on our calendar. Denise sounded careful. "Blythe, I want to be clear that I'm not asking you to discuss anything private. The board heard that your wedding was postponed for medical reasons. Since Common Table is our primary food vendor, they asked me to confirm that you have a continuity plan. My mother's rumor had traveled from my wedding to my business in less than a week. I could have posted screenshots. I could have written a long explanation and tagged every person who had repeated the story. Instead, I opened my laptop. I sent Denise our business license, insurance certificate, staffing plan, equipment backup list, and the names of the 2 managers authorized to run an event if I was unavailable. I explained that Common Table had 5 full-time employees, 3 weekend staff members, and no operational interruption. I invited her to inspect the kitchen. Denise came the next morning. She checked our refrigeration logs, prep stations, loading schedule, and staffing assignments. At the end, she closed the folder in front of her. This is more complete than what most vendors send us. Does the contract stand? It does. That small victory mattered. My mother had turned my body into a business risk, but I had answered with records instead of shame. I spent the rest of that week locking down every agreement connected to the wedding. I asked each vendor to confirm in writing who could make changes. We added passwords to the florist, photographer, tent rental, and transportation accounts. I made sure Ethan and I were the only authorized contacts. Then I created a folder containing Beth's email, Diane's messages to Ethan, voicemails from relatives, and notes from every call connected to the health rumor. On July 17, I met Rachel Kim, a 46-year-old attorney who handled contracts for small businesses in Ashford. She read the Hawthorne House agreement twice. "Your mother had the right to cancel," she said. She was the signing client. The venue followed the contract. So there is nothing I can do about the date. Not about the date. Rachel explained that a cease and desist letter was not a court order. It would not force Diane to apologize, and it would not stop her from talking about me as her daughter. But it could put her on formal notice that she was not authorized to represent me or Common Table. If she contacts vendors under your name, interferes with contracts you signed, or makes false claims that cause measurable harm, that becomes a different issue. The letter went out on July 18. It told Diane not to contact Common Table clients or vendors, not to speak as my representative, and not to make statements about my health or ability to work. Her response arrived as a voicemail. "You hired a lawyer to threaten your own mother. I hope you understand what that tells people about you." I saved the recording without replying. Grace Community Church became involved quietly. Diane had chaired the hospitality committee since 2010, and she had used the church directory to call people about my wedding. Pastor Daniel Hayes did not stand at the pulpit and take sides. He referred the matter to Linda Carver, the board chair. Linda began asking who had received messages, whether Diane had used her committee title, and whether she had discussed Common Table as if she were speaking for the church. Nothing happened immediately, but for the first time, my mother's position in the community was being examined by people she could not dismiss as ungrateful children. One evening after closing, Megan came through the back door of Common Table. She sat at the prep table and pulled a small bag of almonds from her purse. She counted exactly 6 into her palm, folded the bag, and put it away. "You should just do part of the plan," she said. "Not all 40 pounds. Enough to show Mom you're trying." I set a box of apple hand pies aside for Evie. Megan picked up the box and turned it over, searching for a nutrition label that was not there. I watched her fingers move along the cardboard. "Megan, when was the last time you ate something without checking first?" She put the box down. "This is not about me. It has always been about both of us." She stared at the 6 almonds in her palm. Then she admitted Diane had started commenting on Evie's food. One dessert was enough. Calder girls had to be careful. Evie should not grow up looking like Aunt Blythe. "What did you say?" I changed the subject. "She is 9. I know. If you keep laughing it off, Evie is going to learn exactly what we learned." Megan's face tightened. "Mom's plan works. For what? For keeping things calm. No, it keeps her calm." Megan stood and pushed the untouched almonds back into the bag. "Everything is easier when you cooperate." After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen. My wedding binder was open beside the expansion calendar for the satellite kitchen I had spent years saving for. On my laptop was an 8-week meal plan I had built without realizing what I was doing. A message to my mother waited in drafts. Maybe we can meet in the middle. For several minutes, I imagined losing enough weight to make her soften. I imagined my parents back in the front row, Megan beside me, the family reunion returning to normal. Marisol Vega came back through the kitchen door to retrieve her jacket. She saw the screen, walked over, and closed the laptop. "Blythe, you feed everybody. Who feeds you?" I had no answer. I cried with both hands pressed against my face, while the refrigerators hummed behind us. The next morning, I deleted the meal plan in the message. On July 26, my father texted that Diane wanted every remaining wedding document removed from the house before the weekend. He confirmed I could use my old key the following afternoon, while they attended an event at Grace Community Church. I decided I would return the key when I was done. The next day, I pulled a box of files from the dining room sideboard. The lower drawer caught, then came free so suddenly that a stack of old albums fell onto the floor. One photograph slid across the hardwood. A thin little girl stood beside a kitchen doorway. Beneath her shoes, someone had written a number in pencil. The album was labeled Diane, 1974 to 1981. Every photograph had a weight written underneath it. One number was circled in red. Beside another image, in my grandfather Harold Avery's handwriting, were 2 words, "Needs watching." Near the edge of one photograph stood my grandmother June. She was not looking at the camera. She was staring at a weight chart taped to the refrigerator. The woman who had turned my body into a family project had once been a little girl recorded in the same kind of ledger. Chapter 3, The Woman Arrest from the Sherry, stayed on the dining room floor and turned the pages one by one. There was my mother at 10, standing beside a bicycle with a number written beneath the front wheel. At 12, she wore a church dress and held a certificate from Sunday school. Another number appeared below the hem. At 14, she stood in a swimsuit beside a public pool, smiling with her arms crossed over her stomach. Good week, needs watching. Too many sweets. The comments were all in Harold Avery's handwriting. One photograph showed a physician-style scale pushed against the kitchen wall. Another showed a calendar taped to the refrigerator with dates, target numbers, and small red circles. My mother's childhood had been cataloged through birthdays, report cards, vacations, and church events, as if every memory required a measurement before it could be kept. I had spent years thinking Diane invented the rules that governed our bodies. She had not written the first line. She had been the first line. That knowledge did not excuse what she had done to Megan or me. Being wounded did not give her the right to hand the weapon down. But for the first time, I could see the little girl beneath the woman who had canceled my wedding. One photograph brought back a memory I had not allowed myself to examine closely. It was 2011, my mother's 48th birthday. I was 21. The whole family had gathered for dinner, and one of my uncles made a joke about Calder women needing to watch their waistlines. Everyone laughed except my grandmother June. She set down her fork. We weighed the girls and called it love. The room went silent. My mother gave a sharp laugh and told June she had had too much wine. June did not sit down. I let Harold do it to Diane and Trish. I watched him put numbers under their pictures. Now all of you are doing the same thing to Blythe and Megan, and I am not going to pretend it is concern. Diane's face hardened. You came here to ruin my birthday. I came here too late, June said. That was the last family gathering where anyone spoke her name without lowering their voice. By the next week, June had become unstable, bitter, and dangerous to the peace of the family. We were told not to answer calls or letters. When Harold died in 2014, she was not welcomed back. The empty chair at Lakebriar had always been hers. We kept setting it out every year, but no one was allowed to say who was missing. On July 31, I found my Aunt Trish at the Ashford Farmers Market. Patricia Avery was 58 and sold jams, pickled vegetables, and jars of apple butter beneath a striped canopy. When I asked for June's address, Trish immediately glanced toward the parking lot. Is Diane here? No. She looked at me for several seconds, then tore a strip from the bottom of a receipt and wrote an address in Pine Harbor, Michigan. She still sends Christmas cards, Trish said. To you? To all of us. She asks about you. Megan too. After Evie was born, she started asking about her. Did you answer? Trish folded her arms. No, why not? Her eyes moved toward the jars between us. It was easier not to. I slipped the receipt into my wallet. I did not argue with her. The sentence explained too much already. Everyone had chosen what was easiest for themselves, and June had paid for it. That night, Ethan and I spread our finances across the prep table upstairs. I had $18,400 saved toward a satellite kitchen in the next county. It had taken years of weekend weddings, school banquets, and early morning deliveries to build that fund. Ethan laid out our choices without trying to make the decision for me. We can go to the courthouse, he said. We can wait until spring. Or we can use part of this and build something ourselves. His younger brother Luke was 32 and scheduled to deploy with the Ohio Air National Guard on September 20. If we waited until spring, there was no guarantee he would be home to stand beside Ethan. Noah and Celeste Finch had already heard about Hawthorne House. They owned Red Maple Orchard and had offered us the property at cost for $2,250. There was only one Saturday left in the season, September 14, the same day as the Calder-Avery reunion at Lake Briar Pavilion. The orchard was 22 minutes away. I looked at Ethan. If we choose that date, everyone will say I did it on purpose. Did you? I am not changing my wedding to punish them. That was not my question. I looked down at the calendar. Yes, I said. Part of me wants them to have to choose. Ethan nodded. Then let them choose. But this decision still has to be about what you want. The full wedding would cost about $11,600 once we included the orchard, tent, restroom trailer, dress alterations, legal expenses, and new vendor deposits. Common Table could provide the food at cost. It would delay the satellite kitchen, but it would also give us a wedding no one else could cancel. Before booking the orchard, I drove to Pine Harbor on August 3. The trip took 2 hours and 45 minutes. June lived in a small cottage near the lake, with pale siding, a narrow porch, and wind chimes that moved even when the air seemed still. She opened the door before I could knock a second time. She was 82, smaller than I remembered, with silver hair cut at her jaw. A crossword puzzle rested on the table behind her. She had filled it out in ink. Blythe, she said. I had prepared explanations for who I was and why I had come. I did not need any of them. June touched my hand. You have Diane's hands. She did not mention my face, my dress size, or whether I had gained weight since she last saw me. We sat at her kitchen table. I told her about the ultimatum. Hawthorne House, the bride's plate, and the album. June listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked toward the window. Your grandfather weighed the girls every Monday morning, she said. He believed numbers could prevent shame. I argued with him in private and surrendered in public. You knew what he was doing. Yes. Why did you wait so long? Because I was afraid that if I challenged him openly, I would lose the family. She gave a tired smile. I kept the family and lost them anyway. June said she had stayed silent for nearly 30 years. When she finally spoke at Diane's birthday, she knew the cost before she stood up. I do not regret saying it, she said. I regret how many years passed before I did. I asked why she had never come looking for Megan or me. Some letters had been returned from old addresses. Trish had never answered. June worried that forcing contact would cause Diane to punish us for speaking to her. That was what I told myself, she said. But fear can sound very reasonable when you want permission to do nothing. She did not ask me to absolve her. That made it easier to believe her. I took the wedding invitation from my purse and placed it beside her crossword. June stared at it. If I come, they will not treat this as one day, she said. They will make you choose at every Christmas, every funeral, every birthday, every reunion. I know, you may lose people you still love. I have already been losing them one condition at a time. June touched the invitation. I will come. 2 days later, Ethan and I booked Red Maple Orchard for September 14. I sent invitations to exactly 42 people on the Calder-Avery side. 5 accepted the wedding invitation. 36 chose the reunion at Lake Briar. One person said she would attend neither. The Callaways, the Common Table crew, and the Finches stepped in without trying to take control. Grace Callaway asked only one question: what do you need? Marisol organized the kitchen team. Noah and Celeste repaired the orchard drive and checked the electrical hookups. After the invitations went out, I placed my childhood house key in an envelope for my parents. I added one short note saying I had collected my belongings and all future communication should be in writing. Then I finished the seating chart. June Avery was in the front row. The chair beside hers carried my mother's name. One seat was for the woman the family had erased. The other was for the woman who still had the choice to walk through the door. Chapter 4. The perfect family picture by the first week of September. My father came to common table carrying my mother's words, as if delivering them made him less responsible for them. Robert arrived during the afternoon lull, when the lunch trays had gone out and the dinner prep had not yet begun. He stood beside the stainless steel counter while I checked an invoice. Your mother wants this settled before the 14th. What does settled mean? She wants you to cancel the orchard, send June back to Michigan, and apologize. Then everyone can step away from this until things calm down. And the wedding? You can choose another date later. I placed the invoice on the counter. Are those your words or hers? He rubbed one hand over his jaw. Hers. Then why are you here? Because talking to you is easier than telling your mother no. I looked at him for a long moment. What is easier for you always costs me more. He had no answer. I did not explain the album, the empty chair, or what I had learned in Pine Harbor. I had spent too many years building arguments for people who had already decided not to hear me. I picked up the invoice again. I have work to do. My father remained there for another few seconds, then walked out through the kitchen door without saying goodbye. 3 days before the wedding, Megan forwarded me a voicemail Diane had left for her. My mother's voice sounded calm and almost amused. Blythe is not going to marry without her family. By Saturday morning, she will come to Lake Briar with a casserole, an apology, and that woman on her way back to Michigan. That dress will stay in the closet. She does not have the nerve to walk down an aisle alone. I saved the recording with the others. I did not answer. On September 13, the common table crew moved food, equipment, linens, and serving pieces to Red Maple Orchard. I tried to take my usual place in the temporary kitchen. Marisol blocked the entrance with one arm. No. I know the timing better than anyone. That is why you wrote it down. I can finish the sauces in 20 minutes. You are getting married tomorrow. I am also the owner. Tomorrow you are the bride. 2 of my employees applauded behind her. I surrendered my apron. For the first time since starting common table, I sat while other people checked temperatures, counted trays, and solved problems without asking me to rescue them. Grace Calloway handled the guest table. Noah and Celeste checked the tent, the electrical hookups, the restroom trailer, and the gravel drive. June took a regional bus to a city outside Ashford. Ethan and Grace picked her up from the station. When she arrived, she stood near the orchard kitchen and watched the crew move around me. You built all this? She asked. With help. You built a place where help is allowed. We expected 34 guests. The Calloways, the common table team, the Finches' friends, and 5 people from the Calder Avery side. Marisol prepared 25 extra meals. She did not say why. At 7 the next morning, the orchard was already awake. Staff carried chairs between the rows of apple trees. Coffee steamed beside the prep tent. The ceremony was scheduled for 11:30. At 7:20, a dark sedan turned onto the gravel drive. My mother stepped out alone. She wore a pale purple dress she usually saved for important church events. Her hair was set, her makeup perfect, and she looked prepared for photographs. For one hopeful second, I thought she had come to sit in the chair with her name on it. Then she asked to speak privately. We walked beyond the tent where the rows of trees muffled the sound of setup. Dan looked toward the farmhouse. Is she here? If you mean June, yes. You need to send her home. No. Listen before you make another mistake. She had a plan. If I asked June to leave immediately, Diane would call all 36 relatives preparing to attend the Lake Briar reunion. We could move the ceremony from 11:30 to 2. My father would walk me down the aisle. Megan and Evie would sit in the front row. Every chair would be filled. I would have the family photograph I had always wanted. All you have to do, Diane said, is stop turning a health issue into a family war. For 3 seconds, I wanted to say yes. I saw my father beside me beneath the apple trees. I saw Megan fastening my dress. I saw Evie throwing flower petals. I saw my mother in the front row, smiling as though she had always wanted me there. I saw a photograph without empty spaces. That picture had been pulling me forward since childhood, since the folding table by the kitchen door, since every plate I carried into a room where everyone else was already seated. If I refused, my mother might never come back. I could feel the old instinct rising, the one that told me peace was available if I became smaller. Then I thought of the album. I found Diane, 1974 to 1981. My mother's face changed. Where? In the dining room sideboard. You had no right to go through those things. Dad told me to collect my papers. You should not have opened it. I told her I had seen the numbers beneath the photographs, the red circles, the weight chart on the refrigerator, Harold's notes, good week, too many sweets, needs watching. If I had been there when you were that little girl beside the scale, I would have taken the chart down. I would have erased every number under those pictures. I would have told her that her body was not a report card. Diane's eyes filled, but her voice remained hard. You do not understand what it was like. I understand enough to know it hurt you. Then you should understand why I am trying to protect you. Protecting a child does not mean hurting her before someone else gets the chance. She looked away. I said the words I had been carrying since I found the album. That little girl grew up and handed me the pencil. My mother flinched. She said she had only wanted me spared from humiliation. She said the world was cruel to women who let themselves go. She said she had tried to give me discipline before strangers gave me ridicule. I pointed toward the front row. June's chair was there. Beside it was another chair with Blythe Calder written on the card. You are still invited. My mother stared at the two names. You can sit beside her. You can stay for the ceremony and the meal. But you cannot weigh anyone. You cannot comment on what they eat. You cannot attach conditions to whether you love them. And you cannot ask June to disappear. Diane turned back to me. So you are choosing her over your own mother? No. I am not choosing her over you. I am choosing to live whole instead of being welcomed on conditions. My mother stood very still. Then she said I would regret humiliating her. She walked back to the car at 7:45. I did not follow. Diane drove directly from Red Maple Orchard to Lake Briar Pavilion. At 11:30, my wedding began on time. I walked alone between the apple trees. I did not ask anyone to replace my father. The empty place beside me was painful, but it was honest. Diane's chair remained empty beside June. Ethan spoke about the life we already had. 12-hour Saturdays, invoices spread across our apartment, butter and onions in the air, and stacks of science papers on the prep table. He said, every version of me had been enough before anyone gave me permission to believe it. We married in front of 34 people. By noon, the ceremony was over and the reception had begun. I did not witness what happened next at Lake Briar. Megan, Trish, and Robert told me afterward. One cousin sent me part of it on video. 36 relatives had gathered at the pavilion. Diane stood at the head of the room and announced that I had chosen a bitter old woman over my parents. Lunch began around 12:15. Without common table, they served store-bought fried chicken, packaged salad, and sheet cake. When dessert was passed, Diane cut Evie a smaller piece. One is enough for a little girl. Evie looked at Megan, then set down her fork even though she had barely eaten. Megan later told me that was the moment she saw herself at 9 years old, waiting for permission to be hungry. At 12:30, Trish pushed back her chair. Diane told her to sit down. Trish picked up her purse. Our mother is 22 minutes away. I already lost 13 years because staying quiet was easier. Then she walked out of the pavilion. One chair at Lake Briar stood empty while Diane continued speaking as though no one had moved. Chapter 5, the longer. Table Trish's departure did not empty the pavilion all at once. For several minutes, no one moved. Some relatives stared at their plates. Others watched Diane, waiting to see which reaction would be considered acceptable. Then, 2 older cousins stood and said they wanted to see June while they still had the chance. A younger couple followed, because they wanted to congratulate Ethan and me. Another cousin admitted later that he did not believe everything I had said, but he no longer wanted Diane deciding which family events he was allowed to attend. The room did not suddenly agree about the past. People simply began making decisions for themselves. Megan remained seated beside Evie. My mother leaned toward her. Do not make this worse. Think about your daughter. Megan looked down at the small piece of cake Diane had cut for Evie. Evie's hands were folded in her lap. She had stopped eating, even though Megan knew she was still hungry. For years, Megan had survived by obeying the rules before anyone had to remind her. 6 almonds. No bread at dinner. 1 dessert only when no one was watching. Now Evie was learning the same lesson. Megan stood, walked to the dessert table, and cut a normal piece of cake. She placed it in front of her daughter. "We are going to Aunt Blythe's wedding." Diane's face tightened. "You will regret embarrassing this family." Megan picked up Evie's sweater. "No speech," she told me later. "I knew if I kept talking, she would find a way to make me doubt myself." She took Evie's hand and walked out. As more people began gathering purses and car keys, Diane turned to my father. "You are staying with me." Robert had spent most of his marriage avoiding conflict by standing close enough to witness it and far enough away to deny responsibility. That afternoon, he finally stopped pretending silence was neutral. "I should have gone to my daughter this morning." Diane called him disloyal. My father shook his head. No, staying quiet this long was the disloyal part. He left Lake Briar. By the end of lunch, 22 of the 36 people at the reunion had gone. 14 remained with Diane, some still believed her. Others were simply not ready to challenge her in public. I did not need the entire family to change for the 22, who left to have made a real choice. Trish arrived at Red Maple Orchard around 12:55, while the reception was underway. I saw her stop near the edge of the tent when she noticed June. For a few seconds, neither sister moved, then Trish crossed the grass. "I kept every letter," she said. "I am sorry I never answered." June did not tell her 13 years no longer mattered. She did not offer instant forgiveness. She opened her arms. Trish stepped into them. Between 1 and 2 o'clock, cars began turning onto the orchard drive. Marisol looked through the kitchen opening and gave me a small nod. She had prepared for exactly this. The common table crew unfolded more chairs, opened the extra food trays, and divided the side dishes so no one arrived to an empty plate. Megan came with Evie. Evie walked toward June slowly, studying the woman she had only heard described as dangerous. June crouched as far as her knees allowed. "You must be Evie." Evie nodded. "Mom says you do crossword puzzles in ink." June smiled, "Only when I am reasonably sure." By 2 o'clock, the guest count had grown from 34 to 56. The 22 people who arrived did not all come for the same reason. Some wanted to see June. Some were angry about what Diane had said to Evie. Others simply refused to let Diane decide which family events they could attend. A few still looked uncomfortable around me, but none of them asked me to remove anyone else. For that day, that was enough. My father came last. He parked outside the orchard gate and stood beside his truck instead of walking in. I went to meet him. "I should have come before the ceremony," he said. "Yes, you should have." He looked toward the tent, where Megan was helping Evie carry a plate. "I chose keeping your mother calm instead of protecting either of you. I told myself I was keeping the family together. You were keeping yourself comfortable. I know." His apology did not restore everything. It did not put him beside me during the ceremony, or erase the moment he had agreed with Diane at the dinner table. But it was the first time he had named what he had done without asking me to make him feel better about it. I opened the gate. There is food left. Near the end of the meal, June stood with one hand resting on the back of her chair. She did not retell the entire history. 13 years ago, I told the truth too late," she said. "Today, Blythe built something I was not brave enough to build when I was young. A place where no one has to become smaller before they are allowed to sit down." She looked around the tables. "I do not wish for us to pretend this family is healed. I wish for us to stop calling control love." That was all. The photographer took pictures of Ethan and me, June beside Trish, and Megan with Evie. Robert stood near the back, present but not restored to the center. Diane's chair remained empty. 6 days later, Luke deployed with the Ohio Air National Guard. Because we had chosen September 14, he had been able to stand beside Ethan before leaving. Common Table completed the Hospital Foundation Gala. Denise later referred us to 2 new clients. On September 29, after a quiet board review, Diane stepped down as hospitality chair at Grace Community Church. She had used the church directory for a personal dispute, circulated unverified health information, and tried to influence a local vendor's business, no one publicly humiliated her. She simply lost the authority she had misused. By then, Diane had lost more than the deposit. She could no longer interfere with my vendors, use Common Table for free family events, or assume Megan and Robert would obey her to keep the peace. That was the only revenge I needed. One by one, the tools she had used to control us stopped working. By Thanksgiving Day in 2025, Diane still had not apologized. She continued telling people June had manipulated me. 14 relatives who had remained at Lake Briar still kept their distance or openly supported her. I stopped trying to convince them. The wedding had cost $11,600 from the $18,400 I had saved. My satellite kitchen was delayed 14 months, but by early 2026, the plan was moving again. Megan brought Evie to Common Table more often. She still struggled around food, but she no longer allowed Diane to comment on her daughter's plate. 24 people came to Thanksgiving that year. Robert arrived early with a toolbox and bolted an extra steel prep table to the main one so everyone could sit together. Our relationship was still being rebuilt, but the man who had once stood silent in a garage was finally helping make the table longer. There was no children's table, no special diet plate. No one lost dessert for taking up too much space. Evie finished an apple hand pie and looked at Megan. "Can I have another one?" Megan paused, then she smiled. "Yes." June sat where she could see the door, an old habit from years of expecting to be asked to leave. This time she stayed. I used to think I won when 22 people walked out of Lake Briar. I did not. I won that morning at the orchard, when my mother offered me everything I had wanted since childhood. Every chair filled, my father beside me, and the perfect family photograph. All I had to do was erase another woman. I said no. Before Thanksgiving dinner began, I placed one more plate at the end of the table. Not because I was waiting for Diane to change, but because Common Table could always grow without asking anyone and shrink. If someone once helped you understand that you did not have to make yourself smaller to be loved, write their name in the comments. Stay with me for more stories about women who reclaim their voices and rebuild their lives on their own terms.